This is Capitalize Your Finances, the show representing you, a select group of excited, ready, and fired up listeners seeking to potentially maximize your money moves and get after it. We don't settle for generic advice of always and nevers. Our currency is our intellect, and we constantly seek the logical way of likely creating advantages to potentially maximize wealth for your personal and unique situations. This show brings you the step-by-step framework to capitalize your finances in all aspects of your financial situation. And we strive to explore strategies and ideas to potentially help you capitalize on your financial decisions. We are capitalizers, and this is our show. Welcome back to Capitalize Your Finances. As always, I'm your host, Christopher A. Paniotu, the Cap in Capitalize. And today we have a very successful and rather unique guest outside of the world of finance, the legendary comedian, Mr. Fahim Anwar. Fahim, welcome to the show,
Oh,
man.
thank you. I gotta have you like MC my shows. This is like one of the best intros. I don't get intros like this even at my stand-up shows.
Well, I will tell you now that we have a daughter on the way. Any dollars that we can make do go towards her. So we will start billing separately for that if you need it. But in all seriousness, man,
right.
like you've absolutely crushed it. We've been waiting for you for a while. It's going to be a really exciting episode because how many people can look someone in the eye like you did when we first met at the Kraken game and say, I'm a comedian? You know?
Yeah, it's like saying you're an astronaut or something. Like you almost feel foolish saying it. Like that is how I generate my income and that is the profession I'm in, the occupation. But it's like saying I'm a clown or something, but I'm making a viable living being a clown.
Oh, yeah. Well,
it's a highbrow clown. I'm a sophisticated clown.
You are. Yeah, sophisticated clown. Yeah, totally. Yeah, that you should use that for marketing. Well, and just background for the capitalizers that are listening in, it was kind of interesting because, Fahim, and I'll have him talk a little bit more about his background, but we actually met at a Kraken game through his brother and my CPA, who's one of my best friends, and I had no idea who this guy was. And now that I've started to get to know, obviously, your brother, and we've gotten to know each other a little bit, it is so cool to not only know you, but then two, kind of see your career just skyrocketing from where you've started. I mean, it's a journey, man. It is a freaking
yeah.
Yeah,
it's I think that's the thing that's hard for people to understand. Like they just hear you're a comedian or something and they don't know the trajectory to that, but it is such a slog and there's a process and you don't wake up and you're that. It's like a journey like anything else, like a doctor doesn't just wake up a doctor. There's steps involved.
Yeah, no, for sure. And before we talk about that, kind of dive it in, I wanted you to give our listeners a little bit of a background personally regarding you and your family in Seattle and how you guys made it. Because, being from Afghanistan, it's a pretty unique story, and I don't think a ton of people can relate to it. So give us some background on you and your family.
Yeah, so my parents are from Afghanistan, and I always think like, I'm doing stand-up comedy and stuff right now, and obviously that would not be happening if I were still in Afghanistan. Like, I wasn't born there, but sometimes you think about like, what your life would be like if your parents didn't come over. Yeah, I wouldn't be doing this. There's no like rich stand-up culture in like Afghanistan. So my dad, he came over to America for college, like when he was around 18. So I think he got a mathematics degree at first, and then he went back to Afghanistan for a few years, and then he came back to America to get an engineering degree. So yeah, that was like his brush with America. And then when he was over here, there was like the invasion going on. He wanted to stay here, and then he got a job. My mom was still in Afghanistan, and they knew each other a little bit growing up. And I think he proposed like, "Hey, do you want to get married and come out here?" So they were living in it's either North Dakota or Minnesota. I forget the order of them, but like he's going to college, he's finishing up, and there was a job fair, and Boeing was there. It's just funny to think like he has no reference point for Seattle, but Boeing. There's a brochure with a Space Needle, and they need engineers because all these planes. And they're like, "Do you want a job in Everett?" And you just look at a brochure with Space Needle. You go, "All right." It's just crazy how that's how my life. That's the impetus of my life. Is just my dad seeing the Space Needle on a brochure and needing a job, and my mom and dad going to
Oh
Seattle,
yeah.
and that's how me and my brother just our childhood and everything, our upbringing was in Seattle.
Well, it does make sense because in a way, right? Because if you said they were in North Dakota, I know that was one of the states. Like,
Hmm.
there's
Yeah,
nothing in North Dakota. I mean, no offense to all of our fans that are in North
sure. What
Dakota.
if I became this like world class linebacker though? Just there's nothing else to do but just
Nothing.
smash mouth
I mean, at
football.
least South Dakota. It's funny. So my brother's husband grew up in South Dakota, and you. I mean, I guess if you're into motorcycles, okay,
Hmm.
that's
Who
cool.
isn't?
If you're
Yeah,
into a little bit of history, right, Mount Rushmore, but at least there's that. And I remember we talked for like a half hour, and I literally don't think there is anything in North Dakota. So you go from nothing to Seattle, which at the time, Emerald City, Space Needle, like you said, you get to see water,
yeah,
you get to see trees that are not dead, and
totally.
I mean, it's a dream come true. And
Kind of a great spot for him to end up in. There could have been worse city. I mean, yeah, it's a great city.
yeah, no, it's fantastic. And so, kind of piggybacking off of that, in your dad being an engineer. So I didn't know your dad was an
Hmm.
engineer, but I knew you were.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah, it's crazy. We both ended up at Boeing.
I know. Well, and for you, and especially your dad too, like that was like the dream back in the day. So discuss a little bit about your career at Boeing. Like, did for engineering, was that pushed on you by your dad?
It was kind of settling. It was because I knew I wanted to do entertainment very early
You
on,
did.
but it again alluding to just, Afghans not having like a rich arts culture for their children. That's something you do in middle school or elementary school. You're in the plays, yeah, that's fine,
Right.
so long as they think it's part of you getting your education. But then once it becomes apparent that maybe you want to pursue a career in the arts of some sort or entertainment, that's when the clamps come down. Because I was trying to go to university for that type of stuff. Like I thought that would help me. So I think I wanted to go to theater school at first. Because I'm like, oh, I like acting. I love doing all the plays and stuff. I want to go. I'm kind of gonna get a degree in drama. And my dad just shut it down very quickly. He goes, no, I'm not, because they're paying for college,
Right.
right? And in hindsight, I'm so glad that I had immigrant parents like this who just see ones and zeros. They see the matrix, whereas I think other maybe certain families are so loving of their children, whatever you want to do. But I think immigrant families just look at the nuts and bolts. Like they came over here, they're looking at statistics, they know what the job outlook is once you graduate.
Mhm.
So theater degrees is like burning a pile of cash pretty much to my dad. So he goes, no theater degree. So it was this compromise. I kept on trying to get a more watered down, but I would think that maybe he would like this degree. So I go, okay, what about directing? What about, film school? He goes like, no. I go, okay, what about writing? Like an English major, I can write stuff. He's like, no. So basically every degree in the arts got vetoed. And then I knew I wanted to do stand up because I think after I graduated senior year, I was 18. So I started doing stand up that summer. I just kept on driving to Seattle and doing open mics, and
Oh, all right.
I liked, so I knew that was sort of my path. And then I'm like, okay, my dad's not paying for any of these arts degrees. I want to get out in 4 years. I just, I'm not trying to be a doctor, and because then you got to do residency. That's a long slog. I just know I want a good job outlook in 4 years. What degree can do that for me? Engineering was sort of the lowest degree that he would allow me to do. That was the compromise. Um, so I'm like, okay, I'll be out in 4 years. There's plenty of jobs for engineers. I'm like, what type of engineer should I be? And then my best friend who lived across the street from me was doing mechanical. I'm like, oh, I'll do mechanical because I'll get to like hang out. I'll know some. I'll have classes with my friend. So that's how I chose mechanical engineering.
Okay.
Because I knew this was going to be in the engineering field. I go, do I do civil? Do I do aerospace? Do I
Oh
do
yeah.
HVAC, industrial, like thermo? And then he's like, oh, I'm doing mechanical. I'm like, okay, I'll do mechanical.
Wow. Okay. Well, yeah, and it sound well. Number one, a couple things, because I just tried thinking of three things at once, which is never good. Number one, your mom and dad's low bar is very high, like very high.
Yeah, but in my mind, like, I'm good at math, or I have a high pain tolerance for school and academia. I can take vibrations. I can learn all the things. Just I can jump through all the hoops. I
Yeah.
don't love it. It doesn't enrich me or whatever, but I can do it. I did well in school. I got the grades. And I just knew it was a means to an end. Like, okay. And I knew that it would serve me later on. Just get through these 4 years. I'll be able to live on my own because they weren't stoked about me doing stand up to begin with. It's
Right.
not like
Right.
they were supporting me or emotionally or financially in this field. So I knew I would be on my own. So I knew that it would be beneficial to have this engineering degree to be self-sufficient when I moved to a New York or a LA once I graduated.
Sure.
Because that's where you had to go to that's where the industry is.
Right.
The entertainment industry is. So I got the mechanical engineering degree, and I knew I would be able to support myself with it.
Well, and so you go to Boeing, and you're obviously rocking and rolling, right? Because you didn't just come out of school, and you went to UW, right?
UW, yeah.
Okay, and I can't remember if you knew this, but I'm a duck, so hopefully that doesn't hurt you.
That's all right.
Yeah,
That's okay. I think once we're out of school, we're allowed to talk to each other. But if we were both in college,
Yeah.
this podcast would be over.
Oh, it'd be
quickly.
over very quick, and it's totally true.
Yeah.
Well, and it's funny. Your brother was telling me, he's like, hey, did you watch UW 1? I'm like, no, I only watch ranked teams, and he didn't tell me that. Like he just didn't. So to me, if you're listening out there, that was a joke. I mean, kind of. I mean, you're not ranked, but it was a joke. But neither here nor there. So you get out of UW, you're working at Boeing. So what was the moment? Because you said you've always wanted to get into comedy, but what was the moment that you said, okay, I'm done? Like Boeing's out, I'm going all in on comedy. Was there a plan? Did you kind of wing it? Like, talk to me about that.
I was pretty methodical about it. I think people hear my story, and the Hollywood version of it is just because this is the fantasy so many people have. So many people are in jobs that they don't enjoy. They look at the clock every day, and I think they hear my story and they think I was working at Boeing, and one day I was like, I'm done with this. This isn't what I break my pencil and I'm out of here. And then I just I go to the Comedy Store and like kill that night, and A Star Is Born. They think that career happens in a week or something. That's the fantasy version of it. But I was plotting the whole time. I knew, okay, I had to go to college. My parents were going to pay for an engineering degree. Okay, so that means I'm doing stand-up in LA or in Seattle for 4 years. I'm getting good in Seattle. I'm getting a nice comedic foundation while I am appeasing my parents and also setting myself up for... It's nice to have a tangible degree while you chase this other thing, because this is so flimsy. I knew very well. Some people are so delusional, or maybe it's utter confidence, like, I'm going to make it no matter what. I think I had the potential to do that, but I wanted to at least have a safety net of, if it doesn't, I'm not eating out of a dumpster. Like, why sacrifice? If you have the aptitude, I'm able to get an engineering degree, so why not do that while I pursue this other thing, so that if it doesn't pan out, not like I'm not trying really hard at this entertainment thing, but your life's not that bad. If it doesn't work out, I'm not, working at Chili's for 30 years. Like, I'm not to slam. I don't know if you have big Chili's servers listeners.
We have a niche of employees that work at Chili's. So,
What if it's like an Applebee's employee? Is like, Gladys, not me. I've been working at Applebee's for 30 years. That would have been embarrassing.
Yeah. We're good. we made it.
Yeah.
Right?
Well, my shift's back on. I got to stop listening to this podcast. So, yeah, that was the kind of... Okay, so I planned it that way, where let me get the solid degree while I pursue this engineering. I'm waiting in the wings in Seattle until I'm able to move to LA. So I'm getting good. And then I graduate, and then, okay, I'm like, I got to go to New York or LA to do the next step of this.
You didn't
'Cause
think
that's
maybe
where you got to go.
Chicago too, or is it really just LA, New York?
Chicago is a great comedy city, but it's a stepping stone city.
Oh, okay.
Even people from Chicago eventually go to New
Right.
York, or people from Boston eventually go to New York, or San Francisco, they go to LA. So these are great scenes. They're bigger than Seattle, but it'd be kind of a stutter step. I needed
Got it.
the big leagues. The big leagues is LA and New
Yeah,
York.
yeah.
So my parents are in Seattle. All I've known is West Coast. It's a short plane ride home. There's 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 TV, film. It's more than stand up out here. New York is just more stand. There's not a lot of film and TV opportunity out there too. And I wanted to be able to do it all, like stand up, TV, film. So just LA
Yeah.
seemed like the logical place to be. So I just applied to a bunch of jobs once I got my degree in SoCal. I was just trying to get as close to Hollywood as I could with applying. And I was on Google Maps because I didn't know the landscape.
Right.
I'm like 20 or 21 when I'm looking on Google Maps, and I applied to this. It's called RSI. They're a cabinet manufacturer, and they're in Anaheim. I thought like, oh, Anaheim's close enough to West Hollywood. If I got that job, I don't know if I would even be where I got so far. I would have been in traffic one day and just be like, I'm not doing comedy.
Oh yeah, you'd still be there. We wouldn't have you
Yeah,
on this
yeah.
podcast. Yeah.
Exactly.
Well,
But I would be such a good cabinet maker. So that, and then I'm trying to think. Oh, my dad, he worked at Boeing, right?
right.
And he just had this. Boeing has this directory of all the managers or anybody. It's sort of like a phone book or a Rolodex, a database of people who work at different Boeings. And he got some managers from the Long Beach Boeing. He goes, "Why don't you email them?" And I sometimes you think, y'all, your parents are old school. They think the world works like it's the 50s. Like, that's not how it works. I have to put my resume on Monster.
Yeah.
I'm thinking like that. I think that's how the world works. But there is truth to what my dad is saying. There is something about that human, personal, reaching out. If I uploaded a Monster, then you're just... they get so many, you don't stand out. But an email and a personal touch goes so far. That's how everything gets done.
Oh yeah.
But you're naive when you're younger. You think like, no, you upload your resume to Monster and you fill out all the fields, and they'll know that I'm great. No, you just run together with everything else.
Yeah. Yeah. Well,
Yeah, they just see a wall of text. You don't stand out.
no. Well, and also I'm just laughing at Monster because, like, especially to like our younger listeners, they're gonna be like, "What the heck is this?"
What is Monster?
about?
Yeah, they go the energy drink. They had a job site.
Yeah. Well, and it's funny because I mean I'm not that old. I'm only 31, right? I had my first my first like, oh, I'm turning the corner moment because I was talking to one of my clients' kids about Nelly, the rapper, like with the
Yeah.
Band-Aid.
Oh my God.
And I
Yeah.
remember he looks at me, and I think he's in like, I don't know, 6th, 7th grade. And he goes, well, what happened to him? I'm like, well, what do you mean what? Like, that was just his thing. He's like, who are you talking about? And literally my world just went, whoomp. Like, this is not good. Like, this is what it feels like to turn that.
Yeah, you had a crisis.
Yeah.
I had that one time where I think I'm doing a college gig one time, and I had this Saved by the Bell joke, and they were just like staring at me, and I'm having an existential crisis on stage where I'm just realizing this huge auditorium of people and humans don't know Saved by the Bell, and I'm having to reconcile that. I'm like, whoa, that's crazy.
So, and I don't,
Because that was such a fabric of my life.
well, and I don't, I don't want to get too off topic on that. So, but when you're on stage, I'm just super curious, and you have that moment where, and it's happening so fast. I mean, you're making it sound like it's slow, but it's seconds, and you go, oh my gosh, the entire crowd does not know anything that's coming out of my mouth. Like, do you just like, how do you figure that out? Do you just pivot, or do you just go, you know what, I'm just gonna commit, and hopefully they pick up on it.
It's one of those things where you feel it way more than the audience does. Like, even if you're trying to find your place, maybe you forget for a second, like what joke's next or something that's happening. It may feel like 30 minutes to you, an eternity, but in the audience, it was probably like 3 seconds. And they don't even pick up on that. Just you're moving so much your mind is moving so much faster than the show being presented that I can have that little crisis, but it doesn't really read. I've been doing it long enough where I can just segue quickly into a different bit. That's the art, just not melting down when something goes wrong.
Right.
You're able to handle the situation.
Okay. No, that's totally.
Yeah. So I applied to Boeing. And then I got some interview from the managers there. So I was able to do a phone interview from Seattle, and they asked me some questions, and then they sent me a job offer, and that was kind of my ticket to SoCal. So then I lived in Long Beach.
Okay. And when you were down there, do you remember the day? So you're down in Long Beach, and you go, all right, I am Fahim Anwar. I am done with Boeing. I'm done with engineering. I am out.
Yeah.
What was that day like?
Okay, so again, it goes back to the calculating. So I knew, all right, I'm here now. So while I'm working at Boeing, I would work by day, and then I would drive up to Hollywood and do open mics and just grind. So I would work by day, do my passion at night. That was the beauty of stand-up, is that it was a night thing. So it didn't conflict with work, because I would get done at 4:40 or 5, and then shows are at 8 or 10. So I would just do that. I would grind for a long time. And I just knew I wanted to get to the point. My dream scenario was I keep doing this until it became very apparent that my job was holding me back from the opportunities of the thing that I really wanted to pursue. Right. So I wanted to reach that crossroads. I didn't want to jump ship before I had to. Some people jump ship prematurely. Maybe it works out for them. Maybe they need that no net to kick it into the next gear. But I like being able to have options.
Well,
yeah, I don't like that jump before there's something there.
So how long did it take for you to get to that jumping point from Long Beach to
3.5 years? So 3.5 years of driving up to Hollywood, doing shows, kind of becoming a little more known in the scene, getting some representation on the entertainment side, like having a manager, having an agent. Towards the end, starting to get some auditioning for stuff. So taking long lunch breaks to go audition for something and then come back. And then, okay, so what happened for the actual leaving of the job was I had a few things lined up that made me examine the job and do I leave at this point or not. So I had just booked this big guest star on the show Chuck. It was on NBC. So I shot that for like a week in Burbank. So that was like a nice substantial validation thing. Like, oh, cool. Okay, I acted in this thing. And then I had gotten really far in this NBC Stand Up for Diversity initiative they had. They do this thing every year where they have like stand-ups who are diverse. It's part of their initiative. And I got really far. I think I got like second in it. Sorry if you hear the leaf blow, right?
No, that's totally okay.
Hey, that's LA, there's a lot of leaves, there's a lot of leaf blowers.
The last person we had to actually re-record because we had our, people come over and mow the lawn, and it's right next to the office, and it sounded like the Texas Chainsaw Massacre. I mean, it was brutal. So, You know what? Anyone listening, just deal with it.
Sure. Just know I feel bad about
He does.
If
yes.
That's picked up. Yeah, really
He's
bad.
crying.
The stand-up diversity, I got far in that. So as part of that, you got college gigs too. So I had a few college gigs, and those paid pretty well. Okay. So I had a few colleges lined up. I had just done that guest star on Chuck, and then I got cast on this MTV show called Disaster Date. So they wanted me to do it. They wanted me to be a cast member. It's like this guy's coming into my house. It's crazy. So they wanted me to be a cast member, and they needed me for 3 months. And I was still trying to half-step it. I called work, or I sent an email. I go, can I take a leave of absence? Because I planned on coming back. So I go, I have this thing. Can I come back after 3 months? And they were like, no, you can't do that. So the compromise, they weren't compromising with me on it. And I just knew. I go, okay, well, this is too big of an opportunity doing this MTV show. Sure. This is the point where I jump. So that's why I left.
So when you jumped, that segues into something I've been excited to ask you for a while. What was your strategy, or did you have a strategy once you jumped? Like, hey, I'm going to get on X many shows. I'm going to write this many scripts. Like, what did that look like?
It just seemed like enough of a footing to leave the shore. So financially, I had that covered with the college gigs, and then the MTV show, that was decent money. I mean, in hindsight, not really, because like it's MTV, they don't pay as well as network or something. But when you're in your 20s, and it's an MTV show. MTV was bigger than it is now. Like, yeah, those two things: the financial basis covered with the college gigs, and then the MTV cast member thing for 3 months, and then just booking the Chuck thing. Those were enough positive signals for me, where it felt like, okay, this could snowball, or these are enough things. Like one might be a fluke, but these three things felt like, okay, there's something happening here, and on the entertainment side of it, I think I can just do this full time.
That's so interesting too. How I don't want to. No, I'm going to say it. Like strategically calculated you were in your steps to becoming not only just successful overall, but financially not becoming destitute. Because you hear about this a lot, where it's not just comedy, but a lot of entertainers are not calculated with their money at all. I mean, Norm Macdonald, who, God rest his soul, he was notoriously terrible, from what I heard, with his
Yeah.
money. And then it started coming out where that was pretty common in the comedic field. So, I mean, you're one of a kind in that regard, or at least one of few.
I guess for me, it's peace of mind. And even when I jumped ship from Boeing, I kept my expenses really low, because when you keep your expenses super low, you have power, you have leverage, you have the opportunity to do things the way you want to. I don't have to take some gig in Riverside or like Bakersfield for $200, and then the type of art and comedy that you're doing out there is gonna be just serving that room at that. You're not. It's not elevated. You're almost like babysitting. Like if you're doing a bad bar show and you're getting good at bad bar shows, you're picking up bad traits. I mean, they're good for that situation,
Yeah.
but like Steve Martin doesn't become Steve Martin by doing bad biker bar shows in Riverside or something. It's a different thing. It's a different muscle.
Right.
And that's not the type of comedy I wanted to do. So I was able to stay local because I had money. I was staying in the studio apartment in Koreatown for a long time when I moved from. It was like really tiny, but it was fine. I didn't need much more. My biggest expenses were probably meals. I could have cooked more, but I didn't buy super nice things, and yeah, I didn't need a lot.
Yeah.
I'm not a materialistic guy. I like money to create opportunities. When you buy things, those are anchors.
Right.
This is a macro level thing, so I mean, this has happened recently, but it was really eye-opening. The pandemic happened, and there was no stand-up going on in LA.
Right.
And I love stand-up, and I love flexing that muscle, and I didn't do it for a while. And then Austin was open. I saw some of my friends were out there, and they were doing stand-up.
Sure.
And I had this Zoom writing job where I'm writing for the CBS show.
Yes.
But I'm like, it's on Zoom. I can be anywhere. And I had money because I'm smart with it, and also the writing job provided some money. But like, the main takeaway is money provided me an opportunity to rent a place in Austin during the pandemic until LA got its stuff together and figured it out and things opened. But I was able to rent a place in Austin and do stand-up out there after my Zoom writing job in the daytime. But because I had money, I was able to go out there. I was able to do. I've done Rogan before, but I'm out there. I get to do Rogan again. I do a show with Rogan and Chappelle. Just it created these opportunities where if I had a car I can't afford or a house or apartment I can't afford, then I don't have the money to go to Austin and,
I do know. I totally get it, man.
Yeah.
And I mean,
So money for opportunity is my big mantra. Just money for things. Maybe do it when you're so far gone it doesn't make a dent, but
yeah. Well, and I mean, obviously this is a financial podcast, right? And so when we have listeners emailing or calling or pinging me on LinkedIn, right? It basically, you just summed up compounding in all aspects of your life, though, right? Like it can go great and it can just absolutely dive And speaking of diving, because right now you've painted this really rosy picture, and I know there have been bumps in the road, because there is not a single person I've met that has any degree of success that's just like, you know what, I woke up and, like Ricky Bobby, right? Like, and I just beat excellence.
Yeah.
I was
Yeah.
fantastic. So, can you remember a moment where you were maybe not necessarily at rock bottom, but pretty doggone close? Like, what was the toughest situation you got yourself into, and how did you get out of it?
I don't know if it's like a specific rock bottom, but there is an era, there is a period where, I left Boeing and I had those things, those were good, and I had a few TV things after that, but I hadn't swam far enough away from engineering and Boeing for it to be completely in the rear view. And so when things, this is very cyclical. The profession I'm in is very cyclical. And when you're in a valley and you just left something as secure as Boeing and engineering, you're thinking about, did I make a mistake? Should I go back? What if it doesn't come up? And you don't know. You don't know. Look, I have clarity now that I'm this far away from it. But in the moment, you're like, did I make a mistake? Should I go back? I don't know. But then I would talk to Bobby Lee. We would grab dinner and stuff.
Sure.
Just he's a Comedy Store guy. And having mentors and having people who've been through it before and have seen the landscape, I'm just seeing a bunch of trees, but he's like in a helicopter. He can see the whole thing. And he would just assure me, be like, you're fine. I'm telling you, you're fine. Because he'd seen me do stand-up. He knows the landscape of Hollywood and all that. So that was reassuring. Just someone who's been through it before and can see the landscape of comedy and the way things go. That, and then also I would do inventory with myself every year. I would say, am I further along this year than I was? Is it charting on an upward trend? It doesn't have to be crazy, but am I better off this year than I was the year prior? And the answer was yes. There's variations, but if I'm regressing, then that's the time to say, okay, maybe pivot, maybe do something else. And that's not, people look at that as failure or something, but it's not. I think having a happy life is just pivoting, just continual pivoting until you settle in on a place that makes sense.
Yeah. Well, and it's, I didn't mean to laugh. I just pictured Bobby Lee just yelling down from you in a helicopter, like, you're good. Right?
Well, yeah, you're fine.
You're fine. So, a couple things. Number one, because, all in all, I think you're being very modest on, because everyone has hit rock bottom, but how you've handled it, whatever that's been, has been beautiful. And I can tell you, we've been fortunate to interview a number of very successful people in the finance world, and they'll never go on and talk about any of this on the show. But then once the mic turns off and we talk for a half hour, it's like, oh my gosh. Like, I wish more people would share how tough it is, because especially for our younger listeners, they think that, oh my gosh, I'm going to wake up and I'm going to blink and I'm going to be the next Fahim, or I'm going to be the next Rogan, or, Logan Paul. I'm just thinking of all popular people online. Yeah. And you've been doing this for like almost 2 decades. And and you've kept this level head on your shoulders that I hope people both in and outside of your industry take note of, because that's very, very rare. But I did want to ask, on the switching gears a little bit more specifically on the finance side, just because this is a financial pod.
Yeah, totally.
So you've grown, and you got to that point where you went from, okay, I'm not eating out of a honey bucket. Now I'm able to make it, and if I just put this gear in neutral, I'm okay. And then you get to that next level. And you know what I mean by that next level, where it's like, okay, this is starting to get serious. And, you've been pretty well respected and continue to be respected by the likes of Rogan, Burr, you mentioned Bobby Lee, Chappelle. So with that comes responsibility. So when you started turning that corner, what did you make sure you did so you didn't go backwards?
I guess there's two levels just when you talk about finances and entertainment. I think that those Koreatown days where I'm keeping my expenses really low and Uh, that's like surviving.
Sure.
It's not like I'm living sandwich to sandwich, but I'm definitely just you're sort of dipping your toe, you're not getting
Right.
crazy. And that's part of like the rock bottom. Keeping your finances, your expenses super low protects you so that when you're in a valley, it's not this crisis because you have money saved. You're not crazy.
Sure.
Um, so there's a difference between there's this moment in your career where you're just surviving and kind of keeping your head above water, um, and then there's thriving. And I think in the last couple of years, I'm in a thriving stage where now it's comparable to someone who's been doing engineering for a long time, or the ceiling is higher, which is great. But you don't know if you're going to hit that in that surviving stage. So it's kind of cool. You have a little rocket fuel in the career now, and you've built all this equity
Sure.
from those struggling years. You
I
know?
totally know. Well, are you familiar with the J curve?
Maybe a little bit. Refresh my
Yeah.
memory. What is
So
that?
you are a walking, living, breathing version of the J curve. I'd like to think I am too, right? So for
Mm,
those of you that are listening to the podcast, you can't see this, but most people, if you start your career, there's two people. One of them just goes that engineering route or the steady job. I don't want to knock any engineers out here, right? They're just
right.
I hear the crying of all the engineers at Boeing up north, right? But you just
Yeah.
slowly start growing, and it's a pretty easy, steady life, right? Well, J curve, you start reinvesting in yourself, and so that net worth decreases slightly because you are having to go
Yeah.
backwards a little bit, right? Because you don't have that to fall
Yeah.
back on. But eventually, the J turns up, and you're on that path where you broke it.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. Totally.
And I wish that was something that helped me a ton when I first started because it was
Mm,
miserable starting in this business, very similar to yours. And once I understood the J curve, and when you said 3.5 years, it takes about 3 years. There's the rule of three. Year one, you become known. Year two, you become trusted. Our industry, year three, referrals start to come in. Year
hmm
four, it's game over. It's probably the same thing for you. Year one, everyone's like, who is this Fahim Anwar guy? And I can't even pronounce
hmm
his name. Not that anyone can
Yeah.
pronounce mine either. So we've got that going for us. Number two, oh, he's still on stage. Everyone trusts this guy, but I don't know if he's really inked it yet. Year three, oh, did you hear Fahim Anwar's in town? And then year four, the J curve takes in effect.
That's crazy. Also, the more time you spend in an industry or a scene, there's equity in that. Regardless of what you do, even if you're terrible, if you're like middling, if you have been doing stand up for 20, 30 years, there's power in that.
Yeah.
Being a common face, you're part of the scene, you're respected. Um, yeah, it's definitely a J curve. It takes time. And also what's crazy about the trajectory too, sometimes what you think are failures are actually strengths later on in your career. In When I came down to LA, you do stand up, but then your agents and stuff send you on all these acting auditions too, because they hope you hit as an
Sure.
actor and you're a series regular on some CW show or whatever, because that's a lot of money for the agency, and they want you to hit as an actor in your 20s, because that's just like money here and now for them.
Right.
But like I never got a big enough. I would get little things here and there, but I never got a substantial acting thing that took me away from stand up for long enough. So I would just do stand up. That was my thing in between Hollywood stuff. I never did Hollywood stuff long enough to take me away from stand up. So I was in the clubs refining, just getting good. So me not getting these acting roles or these auditions, not doing well in them, uh, it just made me do stand up
Sure.
more and more stand up. And then you flash forward to now, I'm a good, great stand up, and that gives me
Yeah.
leverage. So I have power. I could take auditions now that I want because I have money. I have a craft. I'm not reliant on someone else to tell me I'm good enough to do the thing. I can do a weekend in a city. I can, if you can entertain a room full of people for X number of minutes, that's a trade.
Sure. Well, and for you, so when you got to that point, well, there's a couple things before I ask. Number one, what a blessing in hindsight, looking back, that you didn't fall for the bait of the distraction of the acting role and just kept to your really concentrated niche, which was stand up. Because
Yes.
that J curve, right? That made the J curve for you
Mm-hmm.
basically just perpendicular to the ground, right? But then
Yeah.
I guess my question is, once you got to that status where financially you're like, okay, this is like this is the next level. Who did you turn to for advice, or did you just kind of figure it out?
I mean, you have a manager, and you'll kind of like someone you trust, and you'll talk about career bird's eye view, just like what you want to do, and then that kind of helps consolidate like what your core competencies are, what you want to do, and usually when you lean into what you do best, that's where the most money is generated from,
Right.
and it's yeah, like I'm trying to do this higher level thinking about my career now, where I just want to boil it down to simple terms. So I'm like, okay, what am I best at? I think ideas. As dumb as that sounds, my strength is ideas. Whether some people might be performing, like they're a vessel, they're a great actor, they disappear. Like Daniel Day Lewis is, he's a performer, he's a vessel. I am an idea machine. That's kind of the top of the food chain. So I'm doing this thought exercise where how do you what are the different ways to monetize an idea factory? So there's stand up, that's an arm of it. There's writing for TV, that's an arm of it. Writing film, that's an arm of it. Maybe writing commercials. There's consulting. So that's kind of a fun exercise for art and business. Just what do you do best, and what are ways to monetize that greatest skill? So if an acting thing comes along
Right.
for a series regular on a show that I'm not super passionate about, that's kind of, it's not the gears aren't meshing as well, and you're spending a lot of time away from your core competency.
Yeah. No, this I am like I'm speechless because frankly, from an entertainment standpoint, it's so awesome to hear how you didn't fall into the trap of being lured to the extravagancies of fame, because then you're just
Mm.
swimming in this nothingness, right? Like, yeah, it's part of the game, like
Hmm.
in theory, the more likes you get or the more clicks or the more subscribe or whatever, yeah, that's going to add value to you, but only to like a certain point. And also, I think looking back on it, you and I were fortunate enough where, because I mean, you're a couple years older than me, but it's not that much older than me, where we were growing up and social media was here, but it wasn't like it is now, where I
Yeah.
couldn't imagine trying to do all of this at 18 when I started in my business, and you've got all of these distractions. I mean, pick your poison, right? Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, TikTok, any social media. So for you to keep
Yeah.
on that narrow path, that speaks volumes, dude. Really, it
I
really
guess
does.
like they could be distractions, but also nowadays those are tools for the profession as well. Like a lot of people are coming to my shows and discovering me via Instagram or
Sure,
TikTok or
sure.
Facebook or like yeah, yeah, all those properties or all those like social media things are actually tools. But there is the pitfall of just not just posting and dwelling on it and just scrolling and getting lost and just comparing yourself. So you have to be able to use it as a
Right.
tool for exposure, and then put the phone away and not get lost in it, because that'll be counterproductive.
Yeah. Well, and for you having more experience, because let's face it, like social media, it was a thing when we were getting out of school, but
Yeah.
it wasn't at this point. That's why you see a lot of these, especially more seasoned, which is a politically correct term for older entertainers
Hmm.
and people that use social media. They can use it, but then they also know the limits and when to separate it. Versus, if you look at a family of four at a dinner table and the kids are just locked in, they are not looking up from that phone, right?
Yeah.
Like it,
Yeah.
it's there's a huge difference. So I do have to ask, and we love
Hmm.
asking our guests this. So for you, how did you initially capitalize your finances to the fullest?
So elaborate. What do you mean?
Yeah. So, and on our show, it's one thing to just understand your financial situation, but it's a whole nother thing to capitalize your finances, because being a capitalizer, what our fans do is we don't just basically understand things. We want to be so dominant in understanding every nook and cranny of our situation where, like you said, you've got that, it's almost that, not cockiness, but it's the black and white logical confidence that I am not going to fail financially, and I set myself up. So it's basically like, what did you do to set yourself up financially, but times it by 10, because you couldn't just do average things to get to where you
Sure.
are.
I think I got an idea. So I never split hairs over money, like how much this thing costs, or like get into the weeds like that, or like check the stocks every day. And some people just treat money like a game and they're just so focused on money. I have an overall vibe and feeling about it. That's why I don't want to spend my time in the minutia of money, like how much things cost like that. I want to think more big picture. So that's why I just generally kept my expenses very
Yeah.
low so that it takes the guesswork out. I don't have to focus on that stuff. So keep it low, and yeah, that kind of helped with it. And then also just I know I have an aptitude for comedy and these things. Just keep doing that, and I want my focus to be on the things that I care about.
Right.
So, and then again, looking every year, am I on an upward trajectory and all that?
Sure.
Um,
Sure.
and then as I make more money, do the smart things. Okay, put as much as you can into, or like become an S corp. Like I finally made enough money where okay, it makes sense to be an S corp, right? Yeah. So do that. Pay yourself. Just being aware of that type of stuff. And then what's great about once you're an S corp, money I'm spending that I would have spent on myself anyways for the business, I am able to do before W-2 taxes are taken out because it's going towards the business. So then you're on top of that J curve. Now you're cooking with grease.
Yes.
Um, yeah. So just kind of leaning into your core competencies, just and keeping your expenses low. That was kind of my guiding light at the beginning. Just focus, eye on the prize, reinvest in the business, and then do the smart things. Once you start to actually make money, then consult people who have been in that space before. Like, okay, how do I keep most of this money? What do rich people do? How do you not get taxed like crazy? Not illegal stuff, but I am a corporation now, so I get to, if I pay an editor, or like when I make a special to pay someone to do sound, I pay them through the business, and that is way more beneficial than when you're a W-2 person doing the arts.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. And for
Yeah.
those listening, you need to re-listen to that segment about 15 times, because there is a ton of value in there. I mean, for those that are listening that can't see me, I was goober smiling the entire time I was doing
Yeah.
that. Like,
It's crazy. You don't realize this. There's no education. There's no formal education about this stuff when you're coming through school, and it's so important. Like when I have kids, I think the biggest lesson that people don't know, or my advice to them, I would say, whatever your passion is, work towards that, but make a company about that passion. If you're into DJing, whatever it is, if you're into fishing, that's great. Pursue it, but make a company about it.
right.
Because that just gives you all this wiggle room, and it's a catalyst for the business.
Oh yeah. Well, and then
You're playing from behind. When you're W-2, you're just playing from behind your whole life.
absolutely could have made a couple comments, but I didn't, because this is a friendly show. So yeah,
Yeah.
but in all seriousness, that is so true. And also, isn't that kind of the dream, right? Like, you get paid to do what you love every day. And it sounds like disgustingly cliche, but
Hmm.
and I'm not saying you're going to love every second of it. I mean, there are moments that suck, but all in all,
Yes.
you wake up and you're like, gosh, I get to go, right, for you, perform on stage
Hmm.
in whatever city. And you're probably pinching yourself at times where it's like, I just had dinner with, pick your poison. You know what I
Right.
mean? And I got paid for it,
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah, totally. Um, I think it's scary for a lot of people. That's what keeps them from doing it. Because look, I mean, this is 20 years later from the
right.
decision to hatch this. this plan, and it's a long slog, and it's driving, so it's a lot of work, and you don't know if it's going to pan out or not. But it is possible, and as long as you chart your progress year by year, you can see if you're on the right path or not. And if you're not, then you're not, and that's fine. There's nothing wrong with it.
Oh yeah, and even if you do fail, hold your head up high, because there are a lot of people that just they don't take that plunge. And for you, and speaking of looking back on your time, and you're just getting started in a lot of ways, which is crazy to probably hear that, because you're like, dude, like I've been at this for a while. But if you
That is the weird thing about stand-up, is that you'll be 38 and they're like, this young new comedian, it's just such a long game. There's hardly anybody who does it for 3 or 5 years, or even like less than 8 years, that is just as huge. It just takes so many steps to get to a certain level.
Yeah, and that's with everything, but especially, because I was joking with my buddies that, I get to, and they were stoked. They're like, you get to interview Fahim Anwar. I was like, yeah, it's pretty great, right? And because like one of my buddies said, how many people can say they're a successful comedian? Like 10? And I'm like, obviously there's more than that, but
Sure.
when you whittle it down for the majority of people, it's few and far between. So if you could go back and change any aspect of your financial decisions that you made, what would you have done differently?
What would have I done? I probably would have tried to buy a house sooner,
Okay.
just so that I'm not forking over rent. Just house seems so scary because it's so much money. Just get into the game as soon as you can.
Sure.
Even if you're stretched a little bit, just get a house if you can as soon as you can, because then it's nice. I feel good just paying the mortgage, and it doesn't feel like I'm burning money. And you blink, and the house is appreciated. You're doing nothing, and your financial situation is shifting just year by year. It's great. It just keeps on increasing. So that I would have got a house a little sooner. What else would I have done? Maybe incorporated sooner. I wish I would have done that, like learned that lesson. And then maybe I would have a lot of money in savings when I was younger. I would just put so much money in savings, and it's doing nothing.
Sure.
Because in my mid to late 20s, even early 30s, I would just sit just like a large sum of money in your savings.
Yeah.
But
But it's not doing it. And so specifically for comedians that choose to listen and to capitalize your finances and want to become successful, what would you say are the best steps to take to do so?
The thing is, okay, this is like a nice lesson from someone who's been through all of it. And I think when you're starting out, you think like, people will recognize how good I am, and you think people will give you breaks, or people will see you making it, whatever you want to call that, is getting enough people to see you the way you see yourself or know yourself. But it's so hard to do. No one is going to see you the way you do, because you are inside your own skin and you know that. But nobody wants you to happen. Your favorite celebrity, like your favorite musician, your favorite actor, your favorite comedian, no one wanted them to be that at the beginning. I saw a clip on IG Reels where like people were telling Jay-Z he's terrible. Watch the Kanye documentary, the trilogy or whatever. People were telling him he's terrible every step of the way. I know he's got his baggage and what's going on now, but just musically, right. People were saying Kanye's garbage. So the greatest entertainers ever, no one wants that to happen. And the same is true of you or me or anybody getting into the arts. That's just part of it. No one is going to say you're the guy. That never happens. So don't expect someone to do that. Like, you're going to do everything. Rely on yourself. Create content. Don't wait for other people to give you the opportunity. Create your own opportunities. Like, yeah, go on auditions, and if you get the winning lotto ticket, that's fantastic. But don't count on it. Like, in between all that stuff, make shorts, do stand-up, do things that can move the ball forward on your own, where you don't need anybody else. You don't need anyone else's permission to do what you already know you have inside you. There are way more people who want to be vessels than generators. That's why generators get paid the most money in Hollywood. Like, a J.J. Abrams or a Shonda Rhimes or a Larry David. These people create. But there's a million people who get off the bus in Hollywood with their suitcases like, put me in the talkies. There's way more of those than the people who do the work and generate the content. So I would say be a generator. If you want to hedge your bets, be a generator, be undeniable, be the person who creates, not the person who's waiting for the printer to tell them what to say. Well, I mean, I'm knocking actors or whatever. That's a different route. It's a much harder route in my mind. But even if you're an actor, put on workshops, work with there are things you can do on your own rather than just waiting for people to tap you.
That is awesome. That is fan-freaking-tastic. Dude, Fahim, it has been fantastic having you on. Before we close this out, where can capitalizers go to find you?
Let's see. I'm performing a lot, so stand up. I'm on a tour right now. I'm going to be in San Antonio in 2 weeks, I think, and then La Jolla. On my website is my tour dates, so just fahimanwar.com for tour dates. I'll be going around the U.S. And then in L.A., I'm at the Comedy Store all the time. That's my home club. And then digitally, I'm on Fahim Anwar on Instagram, and then Fahim Anwar Comedy on TikTok. And then my YouTube channel is just Fahim Anwar. Yeah. So those are some good places to check out.
Fantastic. Well, and then the last question I have to ask is, when are you coming up and performing in the hometown in Tacoma and Seattle?
I know, Seattle. I know. I got to get that on the books. So I'm telling my people that's one I want to. I mean, I always try to come down there, see the family, do some shows.
Absolutely. Well, I was going to say, next time you're up here, shoot me a text, and then you can come down to the Capitalize headquarters, and then I can come to your show. All right?
Yeah, man, totally.
Fantastic. And for those of you tuning in that are still tuning in, thank you as always for listening in to Capitalize Your Finances. If you have any questions about today's episode, or if you have any people in mind that you'd like to have me interview on how they have successfully capitalized their finances to the fullest, you can either shoot me an email, chris@capitalizeyourfinances.com, or give us a call at 253-214-3050. That is 253-214-3050, and I would be more than happy to take your call. As always, I'm your host, Christopher A. Paniotti, the Captain Capitalize. Until next time, keep capitalizing.
The information provided should not be considered specific tax, legal, or investment advice and is not specific to any individual's personal circumstances. You should always seek counsel of the appropriate advisor prior to making any investment decision. All investments are subject to risk, including the loss of principal. No client or prospective client should assume that the information presented serves as the receipt of or substitute for personalized advice from Capitalize Your Finances or from any other investment professional. Christopher Paniotti is a registered representative with and securities and advisory services offered through LPL Financial, a registered investment advisor and member FINRA SIPC. The investment professionals are affiliated with LPL Financial and are conducting business using the name Capitalize Your Finances, a separate entity from LPL Financial. Fahim Anwar is not affiliated with Capitalize Your Finances or LPL Financial.